Hello and welcome back to our second episode of the newly relaunched We Are Careers. And it couldn't really be better timed coming off the back of a not entirely unexpected, but potentially quite seismic of general election results last week. So great timing, Sabir. It's almost as if we planned this, isn't it?
We did. Certainly feels that way, Chris. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, a reminder of what we're all about. The We Are Careers show is your fortnightly go-to for careers professionals working in the UK market and beyond, actually, because we have so many international viewers now as well, which we salute you for, who want to improve and enhance their continuous professional development by finding out about the latest issues impacting the career development sector. Each show will bring you the latest updates in the sector to keep you well informed. Plus, we give you an inspirational guest based on topics that matter to you. And do we have a guest for you today? Now, the aim of the shows are simple. It's to connect and build a strong community of career professionals so that we can serve our clients in the best possible way. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm known as MeetSabiha, and I help international job hunters stop struggling and start thriving with their career growth. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Webb. Chris, what have we got coming up for this episode today?
Yes, thanks, Sabir. So yeah, very good to be back. And obviously we're only kind of one show in so far of the new series, but really looking forward to kind of getting into it. So as Sabir's mentioned, I'm Chris Webb. I'm a higher education career consultant and RCDP with the Career Development Institute. And this week's episode is really kind of, I guess, feeding in directly to what we talked about in our launch episode with David Morgan, which was all about, I guess, forecasting what might happen in the upcoming general election. And of course, that has now happened. We've now kind of got a sense of who's got the keys to number 10 and a possibility of, I guess, what the next 4 to 5 years could look like. And to help us with that future gazing, we're delighted to welcome back to the show Tristram Hooley, a member of the Career Development Policy Group, amongst many other hats that he wears. So Tristram, very warm welcome back to the show. And I guess for anyone that hasn't come across your work before or the work of the Career Development Policy Group, can you tell us a little bit more about that to begin with?
Well, great to be back. I'm Tristram Hooley. I'm Professor of Careers Education at the University of Derby. And so I do research into careers and career guidance and all those sorts of topics. I'm sort of here mainly because I'm also involved in a thing called the Career Development Policy Group, which is a sort of cross-sector lobbying and policy development group. So we try and work at least with politicians and civil servants to develop good quality careers policy. So that's what we've been trying to do. And obviously a new government opens up a huge amount of opportunities for us to do more of that kind of thing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We're going to be digging into that in plenty more detail through the show. But before we do that, we're going to come to our regular item of Careers Cheers, back for its second week of the new relaunch. So, Sabir, over to you.
So previous viewers and listeners of the show will remember our Careers Cheers segment, where each show we celebrate innovative and inspiring members of the careers community, or simply give a shout out to something positive that's happened in the careers world since our previous show. So when it comes to our star guest today, so Tristram, let's start with you. What is in your Careers Cheers for the week?
Yeah, so last week, just before the election, I spent the 2 days at the National Institute of Careers Education and Counselling conference, so the NICEC conference, which was focused on sustainability and careers, and was just really, really fascinating. And it just really reminded me why it's great to come together in person sometimes and to talk really deeply about things and have a really intense sort of 2 days of thinking deeply about some of the issues that we all care about. So that was a great opportunity.
Oh, I love that. And then, Chris, what about you? Who are you giving Careers Cheers out to? And by the way, in case people are wondering, I'm currently sat on a boat. So if there's kind of activity happening around me, that is why, because we're cruising today. So thank you for joining me on the cruise that is about to begin shortly as well. So Chris, how about you? What are you what are you giving a Careers Cheers to?
Yeah, it's going to be a who, I think. So it's got a little bit of a link to my last Careers Cheers. So last time we were celebrating some of the UK Career Development Award winners, and Deirdre Hughes in the Career Chat UK team. And so this is kind of somewhat connected. So this week's Careers Cheers from me goes out to Alex Zarafay from the Arthur Terry Learning Partnership, who's supporting us today, or later today, in fact, as this is being recorded, with a webinar all around kind of the Futures Readiness program he's working on, which is kind of really surfacing how sort of AI is going to impact on the future world of work and how we're kind of trying to prepare young people for that. So it's a really interesting topic, and Alex is doing some brilliant work on that. So big shout out, Careers Cheers to him.
I love that. I'm actually really enjoying the variety that both of you have brought. And I want people who are watching right now to think about do you want to give a Careers Cheers to?
What we will do now is we'll kind of move straight on to the main meat of what we're kind of due to be discussing today. And as mentioned, Tristram's very kindly joined us on the show today to talk all about, I suppose, picking over the debris of the recent general election. It's been a big one for anyone that kind of stayed up last week at the time of recording to listen to it, to watch some of the reactions, to kind of find out what had happened. And there's a huge amount we could talk about just generally about what's happened in the world of politics. But of course, we're focusing specifically today on what's happened from a career development perspective. So Tristram, we've seen the kind of results come in now. The dust has settled. How do you think the career community might be feeling about the results of this general election on a general basis so far?
I'm not sure I can comment on that. I mean, we don't actually know all that much about what career development professionals' like political opinions are. Yeah. But I suppose I can tell you what I think, which is that there's certainly some things to be positive about. So if we look at what happened, obviously we've got a new Labour government. The Labour Party manifesto had a number of good things in it that I'll sort of talk about in terms of careers. I think there's also an area of worry in the Labour Party manifesto, which is particularly the kind of their decision to adopt essentially the Conservative government's spending plans or their, the financial frame that they work in, means that if they carry that through, there's a danger that there will be, renewed rounds of austerity. And if that's the case, even though they have made some positive steps forward in relation to careers, the overall environment for the public sector and for people developing their careers might not be great. So that's my kind of big caveat. And obviously we'll have to see what they do with that. I think it'll actually be very difficult for them to stick to those plans. But if we look in detail, essentially there are three really important proposals that they made, which were costed in their manifesto. So they're serious proposals. So the first one was to improve career guidance in schools, particularly with spending on work experience and on personal guidance. The second one was the development of a new youth service for the kind of NEET group and for young people who are not in schools. And again, costed, probably will have some career guidance involved in it. Seems a plausible proposal. And the third one is a bigger thing, which I think has some dangers in it for us, but also some potential positives, which is to bring together the National Careers Service and the Job Centre Plus as part of a bigger reform of the Public Employment Service. So there are three pretty meaty policies that are in there, which relate pretty much directly to our work.
Yeah, and I think the latter that you've kind of just mentioned there, the merger or potential merger, I guess, of Job Centre and National Career Service seems to be the one that's kind of maybe drawn, maybe not consternation, but kind of more potential concern from some careers professionals I've spoken to. I guess maybe with an eye to when this type of stuff has been done previously in terms of bringing kind of the employment support and, I guess, benefit provision under kind of one roof, or trying to kind of combine them too much, and what that's led to in the past in terms of outcomes, I suppose, or focus on outcomes and what those outcomes actually look like. Do you kind of have a sense, I guess, already of whether you think it's more likely to be down the positive or negative, or is it too difficult to say at the moment? Because, as you say, we're right at the beginning of this Labour government, so we perhaps don't have those facts on the ground yet.
Well, I think we'd have to say that the Labour Party's manifesto is pretty high level. I mean, there's not a lot of detail in it. So all of these things could be great or could be terrible, depending on how they're done. And they probably don't have a lot of the detail. In terms of the Public Employment Service or the Job Centre, I think there's there's two big dangers there. So the first is that we get snared up with benefit policing, essentially, which I think is disastrous for career guidance. We've got to be impartial. We've got to be on the side of the individual. We can't be checking that people have done whatever it is the government wants to in terms of satisfying their benefit conditionality. So that's definitely not acceptable. So that they need to create some space within the new service for that. The second danger, I think, is a deprofessionalization danger, which is, we've arrived on this position where careers professionals, we understand, should be at level 6 to do the majority of careers work, at least. And many people within the existing job centre and sort of public employment infrastructure are below that level. So we need to try and make sure that the effort is to bring people up and to professionalise that employability sector rather than to deprofessionalise the careers sector. But having said that, I think there's lots of reasons to be optimistic. Ultimately, the National Careers Service has been quite neglected for quite a number of years. This is new attention to it. It hopefully gives us some possibilities to make some arguments for how we should do this well. And we can certainly see, if we look at other countries, that it is much more common for career guidance to have a meaningful place within their public employment services.
Yeah, and it's an important point you mentioned there around kind of professionalism. I think that's something that, we've seen lots of careers professionals talk about, is both sort of the recognition side of that professionalism. So, feeling as though they're recognized as being domain experts, experts within their field that are able to bring that kind of knowledge, skills, experience to whatever setting they happen to be working in. But of course, attached to that as well is also that idea of the training and remuneration. And we'll often hear careers professionals talking about, particularly kind of in schools, issues around sort of pay, professionalism that are linked to that. I guess, is that something that careers professionals might be able to look out for in a new Labour government, in terms of, is it likely that we might see an impact in terms of funding coming into public services? Or, as you say, are there still risks that actually, with the commitment to Conservative spending plans, it's maybe not necessarily loads of new money we should expect outside of those kind of costed projects you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, there's no commitment to professionalism, and there's certainly no commitment to improving careers professionals or educators or anyone else's pay. So I think there's no particular reason to think that will go up just because we've elected a Labour government. Now, what I would hope is that a Labour government is a bit more open to those kinds of arguments, a bit more flexible in the way it thinks about public finances and so on. But that remains to be seen. So, I mean, I think I would very much encourage people, if you care about those issues around professionalism, around pay and conditions and so on, make sure you're in the CDI, make sure you join your relevant trade union, whether that's Unison or something else. These are the ways that we're going to exert power and influence on the government as it moves forward. And that's obviously something that the Career Development Policy Group will also be making those cases at a kind of national level as well.
Yeah, I think this is probably quite a good time to kind of talk about the work of the Career Development Policy Group, because I think we're now in a position, I guess, where careers professionals have seen the results of the election, as you say, maybe feeling a number of different ways depending on political affiliation or what particular policy areas they have a specific or indirect interest in. But I think, we're certainly in a position now where I imagine a lot of the community will be starting to think, well, actually, this is an opportunity to raise the profile of the profession with a new set of politicians, in many cases, a lot of completely new MPs that might have kind of an interest in this area. And I guess we'll be interested to sort of hear about not only opportunities they may have to do this, but work that individuals and organisations like the CDI and like the Career Development Policy Group are doing. So I guess from your perspective of working with the group, what are sort of, I guess, some of the targets for the Career Development Policy Group in terms of engaging with government over sort of the coming months and years?
Yeah, I mean, our first thing that we'll do is we'll write a letter to Bridget Phillipson and whoever ends up in the education team with primary responsibility for careers, and we'll say, congratulations, great to be looking forward to working with you, and we'll try and get a meeting with them and talk about careers and see whether this is something they've got any interest in. The fact that it was substantially in the Labour Party manifesto seems to me to suggest that there will be some space to engage with them. And obviously, Career Development Policy Group will be doing that, but so will lots of other organisations as well. And I think we're all reasonably aligned on some of these issues. So, I mean, the Career Development Policy Group has got what we call the Career Guidance Guarantee, which is essentially our sort of manifesto, and that's kind of 5 areas, and actually 3 of them there's reasonable. Sorry, 6 areas. There's the 3 of them that there is progress in the Labour Party manifesto. So one of them is finish the Gatsby revolution, which they're looking to put some more money into schools. Second one is challenging youth unemployment. They're putting some more money into the youth services. The third one is lifelong career development, and the reform of the Job Centre Plus and National Careers Service will give us some space, I think, to move those things forward. So some of the things we've been asking for, we've got a good chance will happen. The other things that we want there to be a strategy on career guidance or career development. We want there to be positive outcomes from higher level education. So that's doing something to improve the career development that's available to people in further and higher education. And finally, there's this issue of professionalism, and those 3, there's not much. So there'll be areas that we'll be trying to push on, and we'd encourage, if you have a chance to meet your new MP, you've probably got a new MP now, raise career development, ask them where they stand, put them in touch with the Career Development Policy Group or the CDI, and we are absolutely happy to talk to all people who are involved in that. Just one other thing that I think is worth saying is that there is a very big likelihood that some of this stuff will be devolved down to more local levels. And so politics in Westminster will matter, of course, but also will politics at the mayoral level, at the local government level. And so there's also a lot of stuff that I think the Career Development Policy Group is going to try and think about some of this localism as well, but also it probably requires people who are active locally, so careers companies and trade unions and local branches of CDI and so on, to also talk to their local council, their mayor. Those kinds of meetings will also be very important, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, because I just read this morning, actually, at our time of recording, that various mayors were on their way down to Westminster to meet with Sir Keir Starmer and the new government around, obviously, devolving kind of more power away from Westminster, or additional powers away from Westminster. So I think it's an important point, because we've seen stuff like in the West Midlands where there was talk about bringing their career services into, kind of regional authority control. We talked about kind of on previous show, I think Andy Street pledging X amount, millions, I think 40 million towards specific kind of career guidance activity in the West Midlands shortly before he was kind of deposed as West Midlands mayor. So yes, definitely important for us, I think, to kind of think about things in that sort of regional sense, and not just in that kind of clustered kind of Westminster power sense. I guess really just kind of to finish on, you've talked about a bit about this already, and lots of people, I suppose, having watched the election, there's often that initial buzz of excitement of a new government there's potential for change, and perhaps sometimes that kind of overestimation of change coming quickly. In terms of kind of how quickly some of this stuff might happen, are there sort of timelines at the moment that we can look out for as careers professionals, or is it one of those things where a lot of the stuff we're talking about is actually quite long-term change, where we're not likely to see immediate change within the areas we've been discussing today?
Well, I guess there will be some probably fairly quick changes. It's a bit difficult. I mean, there's no timetable. I would guess that they will have to issue some new statutory guidance at some point over the next 6 months for schools. So I think for schools and FE, there's likely to be some changes, and that might prompt some thinking around the schools part of it. I think the funding for the youth service and the reorganisation of the job centre are going to take a bit longer. But I think we do have to be honest and say that, as far as we can see, and there are a few people. I mean, obviously, I'm not right in the know of what the Labour Party's thinking, but from what I can see, these plans are quite vague. And so what I would hope, actually, is that they don't move super rapidly and put in place something ill thought out, that they do spend the next 6 months to a year discussing with the sector what's the right direction to move in, and so on. And if that is the case, then there may well be lots of opportunities for people to find ways to input, and we may run surveys or things to give people opportunities to do that. But so find any ways to input you can. My guess is that in a year's time we'll start to have, we will have seen something starting to happen, particularly in schools, and we will start to get a bit more of an idea about the direction that some of these bigger things are going in as well.
Yeah, no, and I think, it's good, as you said, to kind of, I suppose, surface that realism around, everything we've been discussing, because there's a natural, I think, sense of optimism and kind of buoyance that comes from any sort of change, particularly change that's been, you move from one kind of particular system over a long period of time to what you feel might be a new system. I think there's that initial optimism. But yeah, as you say, got to be grounded in the fact that some of these are kind of big structural changes that may take a fair amount of time. And equally, as you've said, that's all the more reason to kind of get involved at different levels of where you can potentially influence or have conversations with, those influential stakeholders, whether that's local, regional, or kind of central government level. I guess that leads us to quite a nice sort of place to finish on, which is to ask, I suppose, is there anything coming up from the Career Development Policy Group that we should keep an eye out for as careers professionals? And I guess if anybody wants to find out more about your work or get in touch with the Career Development Policy Group, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so the Career Development Policy Group's got a website. We did have a bunch of events and things planned, but then the election came along and kind of drove a truck through them. So we will, I think, be announcing some things in probably over the autumn. So I think ideally we would have an event in Westminster, but also something aimed at the kind of devolved administrations and the mayoral regions and so on. But we'll see how that goes. There will be more to say, and as I say, that it's great if people can get involved. So yeah, I mean, in terms of my work, you can find me at Adventures in Career Development, which is my blog, or on the ISEGS website, which is for the University of Derby. There's loads of projects going on at the moment. There's a lot happening in careers at the moment, even despite the election. There's work going on with the Gatsby Foundation, the CDI is driving various things. There's lots still happening with Careers and Enterprise Company and so on. So it's not gone quiet, but I think all of that stuff will get focused in a different way over the next sort of 6 to 12 months as the new government really starts to stamp its vision on this. Yeah. And we've got to do the best we can to try and make sure it's a positive one, if possible. So yes, absolutely. And as you rightly say, of course, all of this work was going on before the general election was called. We weren't really expecting it. So things like the Value in Careers campaign from the CDI and various kind of projects that are taking place through the CEC and all sorts of other stakeholders, Gatsby Foundation, we're continuing and continue to continue despite everything going on in the background. So I think that is a really important point to mention. All of the resources that you've kind of mentioned there, Tristram, we will of course kind of put into the episode notes on Spotify or in the description on YouTube. So if you're listening or watching this, you will be able to access all of those kind of web links, links to the Career Development Policy Group website, Tristram's Adventures in Career Development blog. All of that will be available to you should you want to kind of read it in your own time. And I think a nice place for us to finish really with just that encouragement that, there's lots of new people now out there who might have an interest in career development. And actually, yes, there is lobbying work kind of going on, but equally, we can be doing some of that ourselves. And indeed, we may have some new people local to us who may be receptive to some of these messages. So do go out there, do spread the good word and see who's likely to listen. I think that's certainly kind of a good approach to take. So that brings us really nicely to the end of the show for today. We're going to be back in 2 weeks' time. So I won't give you the date because we're recording these in advance and you'll see them all kind of promoted in advance. So just in case we move stuff around in the schedule, we don't want to give you the wrong date. But we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Our next episode is with Charlotte Housden, and we're going to be talking about growing coaching businesses or growing a coaching business for yourself, using some of the kind of key content that Charlotte's been presenting as part of her EMCC workshops. Really useful for anyone that currently markets themselves as a coach, or indeed anyone who is a private practitioner working in the careers sector with any type of client base. So do keep an eye out for that one.
But for now, all that's left to really be said is a massive thank you, Tristram, for joining us today. And we'll see all of you in the Career Sphere in a fortnight's time.